capital city of Kenya. But this city can't be called Nairobi without the Kenyatta International Conference Center.
I'm Anna Polinari, an art enthusiast. Join me as I try to unfold the story behind KICC and the architect behind its outstanding design.
This iconic building has come to be known as a landmark not only for Nairobi but Kenya and the whole of Africa, just like the Eiffel Tower in Paris and the pyramids of Egypt. Standing at a towering height of 105 meters in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi and covering a ground area of 225,000 square meters, Kenyatta International Conference Center is 28 stories high. KICC is an internationally renowned venue for conferences, exhibitions, and special events as it is situated conveniently within a walking distance of several 4- and 5-star hotels. It is approximately 15.9 kilometers from Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. But the question is, who came up with such an outstanding design? A design that has been used as a symbol in many places, including Kenya's 100-shilling note. In 1967, the Kenyan government wanted to construct luxurious headquarters for the then ruling party, KANU. A Norwegian architect, Carl Henrik, who had arrived in Kenya a year earlier, was given the contract to design the building.
Why was the contract given to a foreigner who barely finished an year in the country to design the headquarters of KANU, the then ruling party? Well, let's find out.
We see that KANU clearly was part of a whole movement of Scandinavians into our environment, and it's interesting to note that the Scandinavians seemed to have a particular interest in technical issues. I believe there was an aid program where those governments were helping our government in certain technical areas. And probably KANU was part of that arrangement.
The initial plan by the government was that the tower would be only 13 floors high, but that was prone to change after an offer from the World Bank. The construction was carried out by contractors Solel Bonnet and Factor. This was done in 3 phases. Phase 1 was the construction of the podium, Phase 2 consisted of the main tower, and Phase 3, which involved the plenary.
At the time, the chief architect was David Matiso, and he asked Carl if he wanted to design this building. So he met Kenyatta, and he started designing what was the KANU headquarters. And this was while he was still with Norwegian Aid. But the Norwegian Aid system was such that it was a maximum of 6 years that you could be here. So when his 6 years were up, he had, of course, by then the conference center was starting to be built. He couldn't extend on Norwegian Aid anymore. So the government then offered him the job to take over and finish the building, because it had, a lot of the drawings were done, but in the meantime they had decided it had changed from being the KANU headquarters, which was originally just the amphitheater, and the tower was only, if I remember right, 13 floors high. And then the World Bank approached and said if they would increase the size of it and build a big plenary hall for more meeting rooms, they would have the first IMF World Bank conference in Africa, here in Nairobi.
It took 6 years to complete the construction, with the opening ceremony occurring on September 1973, presided over by President Kenyatta.
Later on in 2003, KICC was returned to the state when KANU was voted out of the government. Interesting, right?
KICC succeeded the Hilton Nairobi as the tallest building in Kenya and was East Africa's tallest building until the 1990s. a position it held for 26 years before being surpassed by Teleposter Tower, which is 120 meters high. Today, KICC is the third tallest building in Kenya, the tallest being the UAP Towers, which is 145 meters high. The building still remains a national icon of independent and modern Kenya.
Surprisingly, Carl Henrik, who was famously known for his use of concrete in construction, managed to outstand other architects of that era who preferred to use steel.
The materials used to construct the building were locally obtained or made, with only a few being imported.
In those days, you know, when you built here, you didn't have imported things. So like even KICC was everything, all the furniture was built in Kenya. That is a Kenya building. And all the only materials being imported were the ceramic tiles and the sanitary fittings. But everything else, for the most part, and the fabric, but all the furniture, I designed everything, we built and did everything in Kenya.
The building's light terracotta facade reflects traditional African architecture, which some people say resembles an African market basket. The use of simple solid shapes and cuboids that make up the plenary hall also is of its own class. The tower consists of a cylinder composed of several cuboids, and the amphitheater and helipad both resemble cones. The amphitheater is where heritage and modernity meet. Standing on the outside, the amphitheater looks like a traditional African hut, but on the inside there's an interesting mixture of African heritage and modernity, with a structure of 3 balconies with 800 sittings surrounding the auditorium. Fortified with soundproof greystone, deep natural wood and lofty ceilings, KICC caters for large international meetings, exhibitions and grand balls, and has a capacity of 5,000 people. It is equipped with advanced sound amplification and recording systems, plus wireless simultaneous interpretation equipment that can interpret up to 7 languages. Its high ceilings were made for elaborate decor. The KICC towering round pavilion opens up to the sky with a series of wood and metal panels arranged like a cone. At the top tower is a revolving restaurant which offers panoramic views of the city, rotating 360 degrees in 76 minutes, but the restaurant has not rotated for a long time. The Comesa grounds consist of expansive grounds overlooking the Kenyan Parliament.
I keep on wondering to myself why the grounds at KICC are called Comesa grounds.
In 1999, the largest ever exhibition to be held in Kenya, bringing together exhibitors from all Comesa countries, was held at the KICC. Among the attendees were 9 heads of state, having come from the Heads of State Summit. A lot of issues were discussed on that exhibition, especially on regional free trade. Since then, the grounds have been known as Comesa grounds. The grounds can be used to hold large exhibitions or park up to 1,000 cars, and are ideal for outdoor events such as product launches, family fun days and music extravaganzas.
Ni nyumba ambayo ina show nzuri, ina mahali mzuri wa kufanyia mkutano, na pia inaletea nafikiri uchumi wa kutosha kwa nchi yetu kwa shughuli ya mkutano za kimataifa ambazo zinafanyika hapo.
The courtyard includes gardens, pools, and geyser fountains and numerous flagpoles. The place where KICC stands was once a recreational park and the only one in the heart of the CBD. It is somehow interesting how the government chose to build a structure that looks like an African hut in the middle of the heart of Nairobi, which somehow brings the impression that KICC is the home of all the people of Nairobi. Very few people hardly miss the opportunity to take a photo of this impressive landmark when they visit.
My name is Dominic Gutimu. photographer by profession. Mwenye alidesign vizuri. Na ni kama alikuwa najua kuna watu watakuja hapa kufanyia kazi. Ndio watu wanaipenda kupigiwa picha hapo.
As we continue to unfold the story behind this amazing building, has it come across your mind how Hendrik came up with such a controversial design?
A lot of interpretations have been given about his design, some saying that the amphitheater resembles a traditional African hut, while others say the tower resembles a maize corn cob. But only Hendrik knew what was on his mind when he designed this building.
I know that a lot of people have said that the design, and even David Matiso, which I read in a book published not long ago, that this is a corn cob and an African hut, but it's not. And if you look at the drawings and you look at it, the amphitheater itself is a flower, and it's the closed bud, and it's based on a lotus flower. And when you look at all the points of the amphitheater, you can see clearly all the closed petals. And so that is the bud of the flower. And then when you go on the top tower, and if you get away from the sandsum crap they've put on top, of which I'm very outspoken about, and you look at the actual original, the profile up there, you can clearly see the open flower. And if you look down on the top, where the helioport is, because there is a helicopter pad up there, that is like the top of an open lotus flower. And it was about the beginning of Kenya in 1964, so it was a closed bud, and then how it was going to develop and open. And that's the basis of the design of the conference center.
Credited for having designed Kenyatta International Conference Center in Nairobi, Carl is one of the few architects of his era whose archives remain intact. He was among the first group of experts sent to Kenya in 1965 as a part of the Norwegian aid package.
After learning all this information about the KICC, I just can't help but want to know who Carl Hendrik really is. Well, let's find out from the Norwegian embassy.
Carl Hendrik was employed by the Kenyan government and commissioned to design the country's first government building, KICC.
Carl Hendrik Nøstvik is a famous Norwegian architect. He was born up north, in the north of Norway, in 1925, and he died here in Nairobi in 1992. But already in 1965 he came here, and he lived the last years of his life here in Nairobi.
Carl Hendrik Nøstvik, we knew him here as the designer for the Kenyatta International Conference Center. What we know about Nøstvik is that he was working for the Ministry of Works when he executed that particular project. We also know that he came from Norway. So he's basically known by most people as the architect for the KICC. You may be interested to know that Nøstvik was not particularly famous in his own country, but in the last few years quite some interest has developed in Norway in his work, and they are becoming more and more conscious of the fact that he had impact around the world, especially here in Kenya, of course.
Did Carl Hendrik do any project in Norway before coming to Kenya?
He designed quite a few buildings in Norway before he traveled here and settled here in Nairobi. Among them many signal buildings, government buildings, bank buildings, and his company also involved in building the US Embassy in Norway in the late 1950s.
Where did Nøstvik go after his contract with development assistance ended?
His contract was actually renewed, so with the Ministry of Works here. But after that, he established his own architectural firm and stayed here until he died in 1992.
Does Carl Hendrik have any relatives still living in Kenya?
He had 4 children, 2 of whom was born here actually in Kenya, and he had his companion, his partner, still lives here in Kenya today. Jacqueline
Resley, a hitchhiker from America, Kansas, met with Carl during construction of KICC.
I'm from Kansas in USA, and I hitchhiked here in 1971. And my first job was with Carl Henrik Nostvik, building Kenyatta Conference Center.
Jacqueline Resley was also involved in construction of KICC. She was its interior designer.
When I came to Kenya, I met a couple that were interior designers who are still here, or at least he is still here, Per and Tori Gahab. And they introduced me to him at a dinner. And that's how I met him. And he was looking at the time for a furniture designer, interior designer, for the conference center.
The couple went ahead and had more projects together both in Kenya and outside the country.
Well, he did up in Turkana, he did the Calico, the fish factory up there. He did a number of private houses, and he did a bank in Nyeri. We did a swimming pool and things in Zanzibar. I mean, there were a number of projects, but of course the most memorable one was KICC.
Every beautiful building has its own share of crimes committed against it, and for KICC, it's all about maintenance, something that Jacqueline Resley is not happy about.
I have a rather heated thing about this because they had a big conference that was at that time, and the building was falling in total disarray and bad management, a complete mess. And I think it was Tuju was the minister at the time, and somebody had heard that I was here because I did build that building. And they called and asked me if I would come in and help get it functioning. They had a month for this huge conference coming, and I can't remember what it was, whether it was AIDS but it was 7,000 people coming. And I said the only way that I would help them was if they gave me, because they had $100 million to renovate, and I had seen over the years how they burned the money, misused, stolen. And I said, if you want me to help you, then you have to give me the contract for that renovation to make sure this building is brought back to what it should be. So I did it, and I found that there was money being spent that had not been agreed by me. For instance, they brought in a generator to cover the power for the opening, but it wasn't big enough to do anything but just part of the plenary hall. And I said, you cannot have it on automatic with everything connected, because if the power goes off, you've got to shut down all the other meeting rooms in order to give you enough power for the plenary hall. They didn't do this, and I gather it went black. I wasn't there. And of course it tripped off the generator, tripped everything off, and they all sat in darkness. But anyway, so the end of the day, after I got it running, then they said to me, oh, but I'm sorry, because you're not a citizen, you can't have that contract. If you look at what they've done inside and put flowered tiles and all kinds of things totally out of character to that building. And I mean, it is a money cow for a lot of people to have skimmed a lot of money, and they knew that if I had access to that money, that nobody would skim a dime, that I would do everything by the book with the tenders. And so, okay, they paid me a very big fee because I billed the hell out of them.
One day, as Carl was outside the building, he foresaw the mismanagement of it. Little did he know that what he said as a joke would come true.
One point when we were in there sorting some things out after it was finished, and him and I were standing, it was the end of the day, and we were on the city square side, and the sun was just hitting it, and it was looking very beautiful, and him and I were getting ready to go home, and he turned around and he said, it will make a beautiful ruin. And that's kind of how Kenya treats it, a little bit like a ruin. I mean, when I go in, and this is a world landmark building, and they have no respect for its original integrity Fortunately, the design is so powerful that they can't destroy it, but they definitely do nothing and no favors to it, which I think is very sad considering what they have.
Now, a Samsung neon advertising board covers the design on top of KICC, altering its initial design, something that Jacqueline Gresley, Carl Hendrick's assistant, is not happy about.
To me, it's sad because here is this spectacular building that even if you go back to the original furniture designs that we did way back in 1970 and 71 and 2, to this day it will hold its own. It was a complement to the structure because the structure is so powerful that everything should be in background to the structure. But when you go in, and I personally cannot go in because it distresses me, and you see the nonsense they've done, and fortunately, the design is so powerful and the structure is so beautiful that they can't totally destroy it, although they've worked very hard with this Samsung sign. So it's kind of, when he said it's going to be a beautiful ruin, it was in relation to the fact that Kenya's not taking care of this building. They should be bringing it back to what it was and not letting people just make a lot of money off of it, but doing it right and spending the money right.
Inside the amphitheater on the wall is a board written Carl Henrik Nordvik's Amphitheater, perhaps to show appreciation for a work well done by the architect. The University of Nairobi Upper Kabete campus, which is home to the Department of Public Health, Pharmacology and Toxicology, is one of Hendrick's projects. It is beautifully designed in with classes on one side and laboratory on the other side. All classes have V-shaped designed windows. The pillars on the ceiling are connected to the pillar on the window, and every pillar has a light bulb on it. It also has a magnificent PHPT lecture theatre, which is old but has been well maintained. The wooden wall is similar to the one on KICC's walls. The doors are designed in a letter form, which is unique and can be seen only in this campus. The PHPT building was donated by the Norwegian government and was opened by Honorable Nyaga, Minister for Agriculture, on the 19th of May 1978. The first chairman was Professor K. Fossum, who was a Norwegian citizen, and up to now there has only been 7 chairmen. Carl Henrik has been an inspiration to many architectural students in Kenya. We had a chat with a third-year student who had a little bit to say about this building.
From what I know, I'd say he's influenced by the cultural aspects of where he's designing, such that whatever he designs, he makes sure it fits in its context. Yeah? In the case of KICC, his inspiration, I'd say, was Kikuyu architecture. The hut, he used the conical shape, flipped it upside down, and it's like he stacked them one on top of the other. Yeah. So what I'd say is that in terms of success, design-wise, it's a very good building. It fits in its context, and yeah, it's one of my main inspirations based on what I'm doing now.
Carl Henrik died in 1992, but it is clear that Carl Henrik was a genius architect, and it can be shown by how his projects have stood out. What can we do to appreciate the work of Carl Henrik?
We haven't honored very many artists in this country, but I think that the best honor that you would give to Nordvik is to preserve the Kenyatta International Conference Center. I think it's as good a monument as any to the person who created it. I don't think it would be necessary to put up another bust of him somewhere. KICC speaks as much as you want to do for the architect.
Well, we've learned some pretty interesting stuff about KICC and Carl Henrik. Well, join me next time as we continue to unfold the hidden treasures in our country, Kenya.